each one of these three teams here is an indie team based here in Los Angeles. We're going to talk kind of about their experiences, how they got to where they are, what they're working on, challenges that they've had, why stay indie, why go indie in the first place, etc. We'll show you a little bit about what they're working on, and hopefully we'll have a little bit of time reserved for Q&A. So that being said, I think there is a microphone down there. Cory, we'll start with you.
So my name's Cory Strassburger, and I am one of the two co-founders of a company called Chitin Lightning. And we're a super small company. We've been around for about 4 years or so, 4 or 5 years. We started out doing a lot of augmented reality stuff. It's basically just me and my buddy Akrima. We just kind of fell in love with it, and we're doing it more or less on the side and trying to get it out into the world. And then VR, came along on the Kickstarter. And that really shifted our focus. So we went full head over heels into VR. Initially, early on, we did a bunch of our own kind of experimental VR stuff for the first year or so. And I think we made a piece called Sense of Peso, which a lot of people kind of resonated with, way back in the day. And at that point, we basically ran out of our own money, which is what we were using up to that point. And so we decided to try and do some VR projects for money. And we ended up doing some really cool stuff for like GE. We did a really cool VR experience for Lionsgate, starring like Kate Winslet and Miles Teller and these guys. That was really cool. And then we did a thing for The Voice. And basically, the whole time we were kind of saving up. It was just him and I, and we'd occasionally hire out a freelancer. We kind of saved up our money, and we took that and with the intention that we were going to make our own kind of VR experience. Now, we come from VFX and kind of the cinema backgrounds, and so that was kind of the draw for us with VR. But we knew that games were going to be kind of the tip of the spear for when VR actually launched. So, in our crazy minds, we're like, we can make a game, right? Like a game seems challenging, it seems fun, and how hard can it be? And so that kind of leads us to our current project, which is a mammoth of a project. It's called Babylon Battle Royale, and it's a game. But for us, it's a huge vision that we have, and we're hoping that it kind of grows way beyond what we're working on now, the game we're working on now. It's like eventually going to be this kind of huge metaverse.
Why don't you give a brief description of what the gameplay is, and we'll show them a little bit of gameplay?
Yeah. So basically, the game it's kind of a multiplayer VR party brawler, comedy-based combat game. It takes place, it's a really awesome story. There's a lot of story in every aspect of this world, but the short version is, there's this kind of mishap future that you're thrown into where immortality went wrong, and we ended up with this subculture of immortal babies. And these babies were ridiculed, and humiliated because they're so little and cute and everything. And so they kind of broke from society and created this great city of Babylon. And the game kind of takes place where you're stepping into this big arena, which is kind of like the heart and soul of their culture. And it's basically one player versus another. So two immortal babies battling in these like awesome hover cars with arms and hands, and then to like a live VR audience of immortal babies all like dressed out to the nines and stuff. So we have like mechanics like taunting is a game mechanic. It's all centered around like expressing yourself and being wild and crazy, narcissism, ego. These are all things that we're kind of promoting in the game world. So yeah, there's that's kind of the beginning stages, and then we're going to be folding in more and more sort of social components, gambling, immersive entertainment, all of that kind of intertwine and feed each other in this kind of like just fun world to be in and express yourself in.
Cool. We'll show. We get the video queued up behind you, so we'll go ahead and we'll show that.
me because you look so fine that I really want to make you mine. I say you look so fine that I really want to make you mine. 4, 5, 6, come on and get your kicks. Now you don't need the money when you look like that, do you, honey? Big black boots, long brown hair. She's so sweet with her get back stare. Well, I could say,
Truth is, we haven't had time to actually record any gameplay, or we're still in the mid stages of all this. So the video is a little bit of a hack.
It does look beautiful, though. That's the Unreal Engine doing the work, right? Okay. Some of it, okay. Let's move on to Koriel and White Lotus. Tell us a little bit about White Lotus and what you guys are working on.
Sure. So my name is Koriel. I grew up around here in LA. White Lotus was created by me and 2 friends in college. We actually started the company after we ran a Kickstarter, and we ran the Kickstarter after we started making, I guess, like some version of the game. It was the thing about our game development that's been kind of odd. I feel like we've had 4 different versions of the game that we've been working on, and actually just recently released last month. So we call like version 1, version 2, version 3. Version 4 was basically when we switched to the Unreal 4 from IndieCade. So, which was a really good call because Unreal 4 is amazing. I mean, we started the company, I guess, in 2013 in order to have something legitimate, that we weren't just making a project and it wasn't just the 3 of us. And also a place where like all the money could go from the Kickstarter, because you need like a bank account. And anyway, so that's kind of the short beginning of our story. Oh, that's cool. It sounded cool. And then for the last 4 years, we've been working on this game that called Zing: The Land Beyond. It's a first-person puzzle adventure game, and I think the way that we've been able to stand out in the sort of indie space is by making our game like a first-person, really immersive, beautiful game, and we've spent a lot of times just like on the graphics and making the like graphical quality like as top tier as we could. It's basically just like you can just see like us like from like screenshots initially to like the end result. We started the game without knowing anything about making games. Like we knew nothing. Like it was just, oh, this is a level design 1 class. Let's make a level. This sounds cool. And then we got into it. We started learning tools, but we didn't know how to model anything. We didn't know how to animate anything, or like we had to learn every skill by ourselves, just the 3 of us. And then over the years, we just kind of honed them, got better at them, and Unreal 4 ended up helping a lot because we were able to use blueprints for a ton of the interactions and things that happen in the game. But it's basically just been an amazing learning experience, and showing at shows for years, talking to people constantly, just making friends. So yeah.
Cool. And I think we have video of Zing that we'll go ahead and show as well.
We were a small nomadic tribe. On these islands, we learned to thrive. We lived in harmony with the land, a people of the sea and sand.
For generations, our people thrived, caring for the forest and all its lives. We watched the sprouts spring from the mud here in our home above the flood.
I was a young girl from on high, where mountains seemed to touch the sky. A village below, with no name. 1,000 years it looked the same. They say the spirits were to blame.
My name was Sarid, King of Kings, prophesied to rule all things, the wind that wore down mountains tall. Before my feet, the world would fall.
Very nice. And last but not least, Tim. Tim is one of two at High Horse. High Horse is based out of Santa Monica. They're making an awesome game called Disc Jam. We had the pleasure of having them in our booth at IndieCade 2 years ago. I'll let Tim give a little bit more of an introduction about them and their game, and we'll see a little bit of footage from that.
Hi. So our story is a bit different in that, a lot of the times you hear these small independent teams. We're only a two-man team. And you hear a lot of you see a lot of vertical slices for projects that look so beautiful, and a lot of these teams are, well, look what we were able to build gameplay-wise without any engineers on staff. It's one of the great things about the engine is that you can really let your art team enact their creative vision without, with the blueprint system and all these, really kind of designer and gameplay-friendly native mechanics. Our whole, approach was, we're two engineers. We were with Activision for about a decade each, and no art experience, no professional experience at all. And our thing was, let's see how we could leverage the engine. Let's see how good we can make it look without any artists on staff. So it's kind of the other approach there. It was like, so we're not going to win any awards for our look, but for us, it was really a matter of we wanted to build technology that was going to serve our business. And that is to say, we're an online PvP-focused company. Our strength as a team is network engineering, and we wanted to sort of make that the sharpest tool in our shed, so to speak. So yeah, it was about an 18th month. The game's already out. It's called Disc Jam. It's kind of a simple game. If you grew up in the 80s, 90s arcades, it's sort of harkens back to the coin ops, where there's only 4 buttons, up, down, left, right, and we find that if we can just use Disc Jam as an experiment to see how fast can we make our networking system, how airtight and what's the boundary for the speed and fluidity of the gameplay to take place between London and New York City, New York City and Chicago, LA, and we wanted to find all that out. And so it was really a really exciting experiment because shortly after our launch, we were talking about several 100,000 daily active users, and we had, I think, thanks to PlayStation Plus, where we launched into, we had, a few million downloads in the first week. So it really pushed all of our systems and back end to the brink, and luckily everything went really well, and we're sort of ahead of schedule where we wanted to be. Disc Jam was only an 18-month production from absolutely nothing to shipped worldwide on PC, PS4. And we just recently added crossplay so that all of our player pools can join, and now as we bring on new platforms, it's a whole another player pool to reinvigorate the community. So,
and you were featured PS Plus, right?
Right, yeah, exactly. And we were launched right into PS Plus, and that was very huge for us because not having the marketing budget, not having all of the kind of traditional ways to build Steam for an audience, which you really need as a multiplayer game. As a multiplayer game, if you don't have a player pool, people won't ever discover it. It's kind of a chicken and egg problem where if people go to hit find match, they don't find anything, they're just going to uninstall it. So you really have to have something there at all times. If you have to get to a critical mass of players so that a new player can then find it. And so for us, PS Plus was the best deal. We're talking Xbox as well. I mean, the point being is one of those games is a service where you get an automatic install base. Really fit our business model well because we hadn't taken on any publishing dollars, we hadn't taken on any investment. We really wanted to bootstrap the whole thing ourselves.
Well, I want to dive deeper into that in a second. Let's take a look at your game, and then we'll dive a little deeper
can I request
into
we turn the volume down a little bit because our song is gonna just. And
That game is super fun to play. We've had them featured at a few of our shows, and the lines are always ridiculously long. Going back to what you were talking about, Tim, a little bit, and then diving deeper. So originally you mentioned you and your partner were at Activision. You're making Call of Duty games. What made you decide the big team life is not for us anymore? We want to go indie. And not only do we want to go indie, we want to go super small indie.
You know, that's actually one of the things I love talking about, because it really, the thing that kind of sold us on it, and we actually quit at separate times. My partner quit about 6 months before I did. And, you know, I kind of went on my own just because I saw some opportunities out there, and that's another story. But what really kind of honed us in on the idea, like, let's start publishing games as a two-man team. I tried to talk him out of it because I was like, I was just so, had my AAA goggles on of like, you can't do this with two people. It's just not possible. And I don't know the reason why not, but it has to be impossible for two people to do this, I mean, honestly. And then he was kind of just like, he started checking off all the boxes, like, what things don't you think we can do? And we started kind of going through it mentally. And really what the decision was, that really was the crux of it, is wouldn't it not be worth knowing? Like, because we didn't know if we could or couldn't. We didn't, and we were always kind of talking about it. We'd be in Activision grinding and in the middle of crunch time saying, you know, like, we do things a little bit differently here. We would make that decision there, and always it's just like, yeah, you're a member of a giant team, and, you know, your opinion matters, but it's not like you're not calling any shots at that point. And so we kind of just always felt that, like, maybe we know what we're talking about, maybe we don't, but like, it would be worth failing to know that we don't. You know, it would be.
And let me ask you, like, what kind of trade-offs do you have to make? Like, on a big team, you always have kind of, especially on a Call of Duty team, you kind of have infinite time and money to get things done. And you don't have to be a utility player. You kind of have your niche of what you do. So how did that change things for you guys, getting out of that situation and realizing now you had to do all the work and you had very limited money and very limited time? And how does that affect how you develop?
Right, so there was two really key aspects to that. One, and this is something that a lot of indie teams, you know, they try to recreate this model, and I often think it's to their detriment. It's that when you're in a big studio environment, everyone's role is so specialized, right down to your producers. It's like, my job is to make sure everyone's on time. My job is to make sure their bug queues things are being assigned to the right place. My job is to, like, take those things off the engineer's plate. You know, as an engineer on the front lines, you're basically just, someone's like, you got a queue and it's coming in, and you got to work with QA very closely, work with your designers very closely, but at the end of the day, someone's managing, like, what your tasks are. I've always felt, and my partner agrees, is that games are so interdisciplinary by nature. It's just an interdisciplinary medium, you know, and I think it's always great to have specialists. Like, we have, like, guys who just only focus on UVs. There's texture artists that are so amazing that, like, they will not have, like, a 3 pixels of wasted texture space. Like, that's wonderful to have on staff. You know, the best riggers in the business are really hard to find, and having those guys on staff is amazing. But when their specialties end at that place, you know, it becomes very dangerous, because if you're trying to start a studio, all of a sudden you're finding out that, like, well, I need to be a graphics engineer all of a sudden, and I spent all of my time on animation and core movement stuff, and all of a sudden you're solving problems that you have no frame of reference for. So being interdisciplinary was always a priority of my partners and my own. And we found out very quickly that, you know, we could cover all the bases. And that was the biggest thing, is that, you know, we have to do the marketing now. I was not used to talking to anybody publicly. Are you kidding? Like, that was something.
You're an engineer. You don't speak.
Exactly. They put you in the back corner, and that's fine for us. You know, like, so being, you know, the face of a company, you know, walking out the back door of Activision into the front door of a CEO's office saying, like, you know, we're pitching this to ESL, or a publisher wants to meet with us, or something like that.
Yeah, and I think one of the main points to come out of that, just as an impact issue for audience, is you took something that you thought was not possible with two people, and you found out a way to do that, which leads me also into Koriel. In your intro, you were talking about how the three of you had never made a game before, and you've decided to not only make a game, but do it on your own. How did those choices come about? How did you decide, we're going to do something not just indie and make something really pixely, but we're going to do something really beautiful and high-end at the same time?
Sure. We actually came into it not knowing much about the game industry. So making a game with 3 people, it didn't sound crazy at all to us. We were like, oh, yeah, this is fine. In fact, like, we gave ourselves a deadline of making, like, a game similar to the one that we ended up releasing, but we wanted it to have, like, 9 levels instead of, like, the 5 that it has. And, you know, we had this, like, serious scope problem. And we were like, oh, well, if we can build something really quickly in class like this for 2 months, we can probably finish something in 8 months and we'll be done with just the three of us. And we didn't think about, like testing everything and like constantly like going back like and tweaking everything. And so over time, we learned that like our estimates were like way off. Like we kind of were shown like the reality of it. But I think one of the things that made us persevere through it and want to continue it was, one, like we really liked the game we were making. We were having fun making it. It's a game about the afterlife, and so we had a lot of stories that we wanted to tell. And also running the Kickstarter in 2013 gave us a lot of confidence in like our abilities to be able to do something, because if all these people thought that we could do it, we could probably do it.
Do you feel like the confidence of all of that really carried you forward into the next level? Like, despite any doubts you may have had, you always like, we were able to do this now, we can probably do the next thing, we can probably do the next thing.
Yeah, actually, I don't feel like I ever had doubt in my mind for accomplishing anything, and I don't think either of my teammates did either. There was not necessarily doubt. It was more just like, are we going to just push this back another month so we can learn how to rig? Oh, are we going to push this back another month so we can actually like work on, like go to this show and learn how to market? And so every time we would pick up new skills, learning modeling, learning texturing, learning all this lighting stuff, like we would just kind of have to push it back. But fortunately for us, fortunately or unfortunately, it's kind of the the interesting thing is we ended up moving back in with our parents after college. So we started the game in college, and then we were still working on it. We ran the Kickstarter senior year, and then we were like, okay, parents, well, we have this game that we really need to finish, and we'll totally finish it within a year. So if you just let us back into your houses for a while, we'll pay rent. It's cool, and we'll just work on this game. And oh yeah, yeah, they're like, oh, this is the real world now. You're graduated. Yeah, and so it's been nice because we've had that support. And since we're just 3 people and we don't like pay ourselves anything, the overhead is extremely low. And basically we were able to kind of, again, like just bootstrap it, like kind of with our own money and with things that we did on the side. And
but you also had the Kickstarter money that came through that.
Yeah.
But, I mean, those types of things gave you a certain amount of freedom because you weren't tied to a publisher.
We got an Unreal grant too.
An Unreal grant. So, yeah. Not being tied to a publisher gives you a little bit of runway, which I want to transition over to Cory real quick for that. Talking about freedom and like cool stuff and taking liberties to kind of live and develop on your own terms. Why don't you talk a little bit about where you and E have located yourselves over the course of the last few years around the world?
I'd love to tell that story. Like I was saying before, we kind of hoarded our money from the early VR projects, and when it came time we kind of looked at each other one day and we're like, hey, after this project, we probably have enough runway for about a year. Why don't we just do the thing that we've been talking about doing? And so, as a part of that process, I think we were in New York. I don't know, maybe it was for the Insurgent thing for Lionsgate. But we were like, dude, let's go to New York and do this thing, right? We'll get out of LA, because in LA, the VR at that moment was like super frenetic. Everyone was just meetings and phone calls. It's all good stuff, but it was very distracting. And so we were like, nah, New York is too expensive. So somewhere in there, I was like, dude, let's go to Paris. And Cream was like, yeah, dude, let's go to Paris. I'm like, surely that's cheaper than New York, right? And so then my mission became, how do I convince my girlfriend of like 6 years to quit her job of 11 years and come with us? And so it took me about 2 months, and finally she agreed, and basically we were off. At that point, it all happened within about 3 or 4 months. And we kind of just got some Airbnbs. We packed up all our gear and just went to Paris. And the idea was that we were going to do Paris for 3 months, Barcelona for 3 months, and then Florence for 3 months. And we just work on whatever this new idea was going to be. But quickly, we realized that in France, you take a lot of things for granted here. So in France, internet's terrible, infrastructure is terrible. Like, there's a lot of things that once you kind of establish there, you don't want to pack up your stuff and go to Barcelona but since I promised this to my girlfriend, we couldn't not go to Italy. So we did go to Florence for the last 3 months. But basically, it was 10 months in Paris, 3 months in Florence. And for me, it was one of the most amazing creative experiences of my life. It was, and mainly because it was the separation from all the craziness, and to imagine going weeks on end, like almost even a month probably is my record, of not checking emails, no phone calls, no nothing. You just wake up and there's no responsibility of any kind, and you're just kind of like drawing and sketching and prototyping in the engine, and we were just having fun and kind of like finding what we wanted to do. And so the takeaway that I had was that I don't want to ever start another project and not do it in this way if I can help it. It's not something that a lot of people can do, right? Bigger companies can't do that. But if you're small and you're able to kind of like create that environment for yourself, what came out of that creatively, I think, is still fueling us to this day in a very powerful way. I think one of the biggest kind of mistakes that I look back and think about is that when we came back from Europe, we sort of just, all these kind of things aligned and we didn't think much about it, but we just shifted into production mode. And our game was probably, our prototype was about at 70% in terms of what the gameplay was going to be.
Can I just interrupt real quick, and maybe you can talk as you're doing that about misconceptions that some indie devs have about the difference between what a prototype is and what their game actually becomes, which I think you're going around on that path, and Tim's raising his hand too.
Yeah, definitely. Well, like I said, we didn't, kind of like Koriel, we didn't know how to make a game. I don't even play games, really. I did when I was a kid, but, Kareem was like the only gamer between the two of us. So we knew how to prototype VR from all of our previous projects. And all our previous projects, even though we were, they were for companies, they were basically prototypes. They weren't shipping anything, they were just kind of demoing. And so our prototype was basically like a proof of concept. It looked pretty good, because I can't help but from the art side not to like visualize the visual part of all this as we go. But basically we had a pretty good looking prototype that was the gist of gameplay. It's like you could sit in this thing and you can have a good time and you get what the game's all about. That's kind of what you had in mind? Because from there, to me, what the right thing to do would have been to finish the gameplay in the prototype and get at least to like 90%, right? Because there was things that we kind of knew in our head where the game was going to go, and we're like, let's just start production and we'll kind of work those things out as we go. And that's basically a giant thorn in my side every day right now, because it's foundation work. It's kind of like building a plane while you're already in the air. And
I think the gist of your email too, from that foundation work, other things that you said that you would have liked to have thought about were pipeline issues and things like that, getting things worked out properly so that you just have a system going. Is that correct?
I think the pipeline stuff hasn't really been a challenge for us. We've been pretty good at balancing what we put energy and time into from the pipeline standpoint, and not kind of overindulging there.
You said, this is what you said, 'cause you were talking about some repetitive tasks are soul-sucking and will drain your life. So those are the key things to spend time to automate and streamline so you don't lose your most valuable asset.
Right,
being your time, right, and what you can actually commit to.
Yeah.
As a small team.
I'm sure everybody here that's a small team, kind of its time management is a big deal. And for me, Ikrima, my partner, says it best, because he's basically like, if you're spending an hour doing email, it's like the drainage of energy of like 3 hours of doing something that you enjoy doing. And so for me, I'm always conscious of, especially on the art side, of like, if anything is going to start draining my soul, and there's a lot of things that come up that repetitive tasks or UV mapping and all kinds of things like that, then it's worth the time to kind of build some automation tool or some Python script or something, which slows things down in that moment, but it's always been paying off in the end, because every time I go back to that task, I'm like, dude, I just have to hit a button. Thank God, you know?
Is there a Python script that automates you answering your emails so that you don't waste any time?
Dude, if there is, I want to know about it. I haven't been able to write that, but I'd love to.
Let's move over to Koriel. So, Koriel, what mistakes did you guys have during the course of development that you feel were your biggest learnings?
Okay, so I think some of the initial mistakes that we made were just we were ignorant of, what it took to make a game, and we had to learn all of the steps, including the production part and QA and all that. But I think actually one of the largest mistakes we made, we actually advertised the game mostly to consumers that were in the virtual reality sector. So, and our game you can play it, regularly on a PC, or you can play it on a Vive or Oculus Rift. But we ended up only really kind of targeting the market for VR, and our promotion ended up making it seem like it was just a VR-only game, because most games that come out in VR are VR-only. So, that's just like the standard currently, and so that's what people assume. So actually, just recently with launch, we noticed, because we're able to see what people bought the game, and the majority of the people who are buying the game are all virtual reality enthusiasts, and we wanted to capture that market too, but I feel like the way that we promoted the game kind of was a detriment, because even though it's a really cool market, it's a much smaller market than obviously all the other PC gamers, and so that was something that I think we kind of made a mistake on, is not fully promoting your game for everything that it is. And then I think too, one of the larger mistakes that we ended up making is we did a ton of promotion and running out to shows and stuff, and making contacts within the first 2.5 years of development. So we were going to PAX and E3 and IndieCade here and PlayStation Experience and GDC, and we were just showing everywhere, and we were constantly doing updates for our Kickstarter backers and constantly doing updates on Twitter. And I guess the last year and a half, we were just really drained from all of that kind of work, and we just wanted to finish the game, because we were we've been working on this for too long. We need to just settle down, finish it. And since there's just 3 of us, and we didn't end up hiring a marketing agency or promotion or anything like that, we did have opportunities like that. We were presented with opportunities actually at a decent rate. We just didn't take them because we wanted to do everything ourselves.
At this point, knowing what you know, would you say that marketing and PR people, or at least the right types of people for your game, would be valuable to you so that you can concentrate on getting the game out the door?
Yeah, we got the game out the door last month, but the big thing was that for the last year and a half, just until maybe a month before release, we were pretty quiet. We were really silent online, and so all of that momentum and everything that we had built up for the first 2.5 years had just kind of fizzled out. And that's something that you have to be careful about, is you have to kind of slowly ramp up the excitement for it. And exactly. Yeah. With as far as hiring PR agencies or advertising, marketing, anything like that, there's always lots of different types of deals, and we would ask is this a good deal, or is this type of profit sharing, will it be worth it? Are they actually going to help us? How will we know how much they would have helped us versus us doing it on our own? We feel like we're pretty capable people, and we're fast learners. We can do all of this, but at the end of the day, even if you know how to do everything, you can't, because there's just too much to do, and you're just one person or 3 people in
Sure.
our case. So,
and I will say, from my past life before Epic, having been an agent for 6 years almost, and an attorney for 20 years before that, those people should be part of your team considerations from the beginning, and you should think about those things. I'll pass over to Tim. So same questions for you: mistakes made and learned, and
Yeah, one
all
thing I
those
wanted
things.
to touch on is this sort of, you guys both talked about scope, and the one thing, I mean, when Jay and I started High Horse, we'd had 16 titles behind us between Tony Hawk, Guitar Hero, Call of Duty, and then some client work in the interim. And the one thing that I kind of was told in the beginning, didn't really believe, started coming around to after about a few projects, and then now it's like almost a religion for us. It's that the last 10% of your project takes as much time or more time than the first 90% of your project. And I've yet to see someone prove that wrong. It's just the little gaps you don't see, you can't ship without. And especially when you're talking about consoles, which have all kinds of certification requirements, let alone just the things you'd like to see in there that would take something from an okay experience to how you envision it in your dream. So scope management is how we prioritize everything. I mean, it was our production model was scope management. It was, what is your best bang for buck time investment? So it's like in our heads, that arcade game you saw would have a lot of different bells and whistles, and it looked like this, had that international that, and blah, 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 blah. But what it ended up being was every single thing we prioritized. What am I working on this week? What am I working on this month? What are my timelines? What are my goals for this next check-in that we're doing? It always became about, what we could get if we did this unlock system, we can multiply our content by that, and that would allow us to do this. And everything we did was bang for your buck time investment, and we just worked at that priority queue from the top. And it was, once we got our PlayStation done, our deal done. I mean, just to real quick, we had no game at all, but we were talking with Epic, and they said, well, we'd like to show you guys, because we've been working on engine technology for a while. We've been working on all the online stuff, building technology for our online games, but not for a game. Like just for, we know we need melee, we know we need projectiles, we know we need motion animation, blah, 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 blah. We all need to be online. So we knew we needed all that for whatever game it was going to be. So it was at SIGGRAPH, Epic's like, would you guys have something to show at IndieCade? It's in 8 weeks. And I looked at my partner, and I was like, I can do it. And he's like, I can do it. So we're like, we'll have a trailer in 4 weeks. We'll have a game in 8 weeks. I'll see you there. And so like we were still contracting halftime at this 20 hours a week each. And then we showed up at IndieCade. Disc Jam had a great reception. And that's where we had no industry contacts whatsoever. And that's where we met, the head of publishing, Joe, over at Epic. It's where we met Nintendo, Sony, and Microsoft. They saw that we had a halo of people all weekend long. And we shook hands with Sony on our Plus contract. 4 weeks, 5 weeks later. And there's two sides of that story. One, we're stoked because we just got our project funded, essentially. And we made more on that than we ever expected. It was like an experimental game.
Project.
What's that?
Now you have to make something.
Exactly. And that was the trick, was that now we're contractually obligated to ship March 2017. Like that's we knew the finish line, and we weren't able to push it. Like we didn't have the luxury, like we could not push it in a month. Like we're not going to get paid if we don't do that. Like we have to finish the game by then. So as the project went along, we knew, okay, like ideally we have a career mode, an AI mode, and a season mode, and tournament mode. But in reality, like it just needs to work online. It needs to have localization support. It needs to have unlock system. It has to have, all these like mechanics need to be in there. Like we knew what that was, and we cut it close. But like we're very, very proud of the fact that we like shipped everything on time. It worked on day one, and everything was supported. And that was like our huge. Because it was just like, what are we going to need to do to fulfill what we promised to Sony? That was the target.
And I think that's a great lesson for folks is feature creep and scope are really, really important.
The most important thing.
Figure out what you need to make your game work and make it work well. And also a very good transition into that fine line between being totally indie, right? And being still indie, like nobody owns us, but we have to fulfill obligations now.
Well, that was the thing that everybody always told me in AAA, and it was that no game has ever finished completed in the history of video games, and you make the only currency is your time. Like don't dig into something, like infinitely dig into something that just has to be just right. Like your currency is the only currency in this business is your time. And I always hated hearing that. Like, as an artist, I always just like made me angry to hear that. It's like no, like right is right, and like not just quite there is not quite there. But it's just so true, and now I'm just like converted to that belief where it's just like it's only time. There's not one single thing. We're interviewing marketers right now, and I really appreciate your point about marketing because it's a very difficult thing to do correctly. Like we started off writing our own press releases and obsessing over the copy, sending out to all these outlets, and it took time and it generated absolutely nothing. Yet, we go to one show. It takes a lot of time and money, but that show made us press contacts. It got us, articles in Forbes and Polygon and so on and so forth. Like those things.
And I would add to that to say, yes, those are important. And Koriel, you mentioned too, going to all those conferences. And when you're starting out, conferences are sexy. Conferences are those things you've always wanted to go to. When you're in the heat of making your game, those conferences need to really be thought out.